Tonight the moon doesn't ask permission, it simply chooses. One heartbeat, you're wrapped in the arms of the man who's loved you since you were kids. The beta who remembers every nightmare you've ever had. Who kisses your forehead after every patrol. Who built forever with you one quiet promise at a time. The next heartbeat, the alpha steps out of the shadows. Silver eyes lock on yours. First love shattered when the alpha claims her as fated mate. Stay right here with me, because tonight you're going to feel every fracture, every forbidden spark, every impossible choice. And when the moon finally sets, you might never trust your own heart the same way again. Are you brave enough to hurt this beautifully? Then come closer, little wolf. The pack is listening, and so is destiny. Chapter 1, The Promise Beneath the Pines. I stood beneath the ancient pines with Jax's arms wrapped around me like the only shelter I had ever needed. The night air was cool and alive, carrying the deep, earthy scent of damp moss and wild jasmine that always clung to him after a long patrol. It was the scent of safety, of every quiet moment we had stolen since we were barely more than pups. My cheek rested against the solid wall of his chest, and I could feel the steady thrum of his heartbeat, slow, sure, the rhythm that had lulled me through countless restless nights. "Lily," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me, like distant thunder wrapped in velvet. His breath warmed the top of my head, stirring the loose strands of my auburn hair. Oh, one more moon, just one. The pack elders have already carved our names into the sacred oak. The alliance is sealed. You and me, we'll stand at the eastern border together, side by side, like we always dreamed. His words wrapped around my heart the way his arms wrapped around my body. And for a moment the world felt perfectly still. No wars on the horizon, no rival packs sniffing at our territory, just us. I tilted my face up to meet his hazel eyes, the ones that turned molten gold in the moonlight, and I smiled. Goddess, how I smiled. That kind of smile that starts in your chest and spills out before you can stop it. The kind that makes your cheeks ache in the sweetest way. I had chosen him, not because fate forced my hand, but because every single day with Jax had been a quiet, deliberate choice. He wasn't the towering legend the stories painted alphas to be. No storm-silver eyes or commanding growl that made the ground tremble. He was better. He was real. He was the beta who remembered I couldn't stand the bitterness of elderberry wine and always brought me fresh honeycomb instead. The one who sat with me for hours when my mother's fever took her, never saying a word, just holding my hand until the sun rose again. The one who kissed my forehead after every patrol and whispered, "Oh, you're my home, Lily, the only one I'll ever need." I reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with my fingertips, feeling the faint scratch of stubble that always appeared by evening. "You make forever feel possible," I whispered back, my voice thick with the kind of happiness that borders on tears. "Not because the moon demands it, but because you chose me every single day, even when I was impossible." Jax's laugh was soft, warm, the sound I would have followed into any darkness. He dipped his head, and our lips met, slow at first, reverent, like we were sealing a promise older than the trees around us. Then the kiss deepened, turning hungry in that gentle way only he could manage. His hand slid down my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us, only heat and breath and the faint tremble of two hearts that had grown together like roots beneath the same soil. I tasted pine and salt on his tongue, felt the way his fingers tightened possessively, yet so tenderly, as if he still couldn't quite believe I was his to hold. The forest around us seemed to lean in, branches sighing in the breeze like they approved. Crickets hummed a low lullaby, and somewhere far off an owl called, once, twice, soft witnesses to a love that felt written in the stars we could almost touch. My wolf stirred inside me, not with the wild urgency I'd heard other she-wolves describe, but with a deep, contented sigh. She knew this male. She trusted this male. She had chosen him right alongside my human heart. I pulled back just enough to rest my forehead against his, our breaths mingling in the cool night. "Tell me again," I said, smiling through the sudden sting of happy tears that pricked my eyes. "Tell me what our life will look like after this ceremony." Jax's thumb brushed away the single tear that escaped, his touch so gentle it made my chest ache with love. "Mornings where I wake up to your hair across my pillow. Evenings where we run the border together, your laughter echoing through the trees. Nights," his voice dropped lower, rougher with promise, "nights where I show you exactly how much every inch of you belongs to me. And I to you. No rush, no fear. Just us, building something the pack will talk about for generations." I laughed softly, the sound bubbling up like sunlight breaking through clouds even as a tiny, inexplicable shiver traced down my spine. It was nothing, I told myself. Just the chill of the night air kissing my skin where his warmth had been a moment ago. Or maybe the weight of the future pressing in. Beautiful, yes, but heavy with responsibility. The eastern border had seen skirmishes lately. The pack needed strong leaders, and Jax and I. We would be that. Steady, loyal, chosen. Yet even as I melted back into his embrace, letting his arms cocoon me once more, that strange restlessness bloomed again in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt in Jax. Goddess. Never that. It was something vaster, older, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. A faint tug behind my ribs, as if an invisible thread had been tied there long ago and was only now beginning to tighten. I pushed it down, burying it beneath the warmth of his body and the steady beat of his heart. This was our moment, our promise. First love, built brick by brick from stolen kisses and shared secrets and quiet strength. Nothing, not the moon, not the elders, not some distant whisper of destiny could touch what we'd forged. I closed my eyes, breathing him in, and smiled against his chest. The future felt golden, wrapped in pine and moonlight, and the man who had loved me long before any goddess ever noticed. But deep inside, where only I could hear, a single, quiet thought flickered like the first star at dusk. What if the moon has been watching us all along? Chapter 2. Whispers at the Gathering. The full moon gathering pulsed with life, the kind of wild, electric energy that only comes when an entire pack lets its wolves run close to the surface. Lanterns swayed from every low-hanging branch like captured stars, casting pools of warm amber across the clearing. The drums thrummed low and insistent, deep, primal beats that matched the rhythm of shifting hearts and quickening breaths. Laughter rolled through the crowd in waves, mingling with the sharp scent of wood smoke roasted venison and the sweet sharp tang of moon-blessed wine. I walked through it all with Jax's hand warm and steady at the small of my back, his thumb tracing absent circles through the thin fabric of my dress. Every few steps he leaned in, lips brushing the shell of my ear, just enough to send a delicious shiver racing down my spine. "You look dangerous tonight," he murmured, voice husky with that private hunger he usually saved for when we were alone. "At that green silk. It's doing things to me I can't say out loud with elders watching." I laughed softly, tilting my head so my hair spilled over one shoulder, knowing exactly how the movement made the lantern light catch the copper strands. "Good. Keep thinking about it. Maybe later I'll let you show me." His fingers flexed against my waist, possessive, promising, and for a heartbeat the entire gathering faded. There was only him, the heat of his body pressed close, the faint salt and pine scent that clung to his skin after a day in the forest, the way his hazel eyes darkened to molten gold. Whenever he looked at me like I was the only thing worth seeing, I turned in his arms, rising on my toes to steal a quick teasing kiss. His mouth was warm, tasting faintly of the spiced cider we'd shared earlier, and when I nipped his lower lip, he growled low in his throat, a sound that vibrated straight through me and settled hot and heavy between my thighs. "Be careful, little wolf," he warned, voice rough. "Keep that up and I'll drag you behind the nearest oak and remind you exactly who you belong to." My pulse kicked hard. Promises. We were still laughing, breathless, flushed, wrapped in that delicious bubble of almost foreplay when the wind shifted. The drums didn't falter, but the air did. A ripple moved through the pack like a stone dropped in still water. Heads turned, conversations hushed, and then I felt it, eyes on me. Not just any eyes, Alpha Kincaid. He stepped from the shadowed tree line into the lantern glow, and the world narrowed to the space between us. 3 years he'd been gone, sent north to forge alliances, to learn the old ways from packs older than ours. The stories had followed him home in fragments. Cade the unyielding, Cade the storm-eyed, Cade who carried secrets in his bloodline that made even the elders lower their voices. He was taller than I remembered, broader across the shoulders, his dark hair longer now, tied back with a leather cord. Moonlight slid over the sharp planes of his face and caught in his eyes, storm silver, flashing to molten gold the instant they locked on mine. My breath snagged. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even attraction. Not the clean, familiar pull I felt with Jax. This was something deeper, older, like a memory my body recognized before my mind could catch up. My wolf lifted her head inside me, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. She didn't growl. She tilted her head, curious, confused, hungry. Jax's hand tightened at my waist, protective instinct flaring. "What is it?" he asked, voice low, following my gaze. I forced my eyes away from Cade, pasting on a smile that felt too tight. Nothing, just, he's back. The pack's been waiting, but inside my thoughts were racing frantic. Why does looking at him feel like stepping into a dream I've already lived? Why does my skin feel too tight? Like something inside me is trying to claw its way out toward him? The drum swelled into a triumphant crescendo as the elders stepped onto the raised platform of ancient stone. Elder Mara's voice carried over the crowd, clear and resonant. And tonight we honor the bonds that keep our pack strong. Alliances forged in love and loyalty. Tonight we name the pairs who will lead us into the next generation. Names rang out. Strong, steady pairings greeted with cheers and raised cups. My heart beat faster with every announcement, anticipation curling sweet and bright in my chest. Then Elder Mara's gaze found us. Liliana of the Eastern Ridge, and Jax, our steadfast beta, chosen by heart, approved by council. May the moon bless your union and grant you strength to guard our borders. The clearing erupted. Howls rose into the night sky. Jax pulled me close, spinning me once in dizzy joy before crushing his mouth to mine in a kiss that tasted of victory and forever. I laughed into it, fingers tangling in his hair, body pressed flush against his so I could feel every hard line of him. The pack's approval washed over us like warm rain, loud, loving, real. And through it all, Cade watched. He hadn't moved from the edge of the firelight, arms crossed over his broad chest, jaw tight, silver eyes never leaving my face. The intensity in his stare wasn't anger, it wasn't jealousy, not yet. It was something far more dangerous, recognition. My skin prickled. Heat bloomed low in my belly, unbidden and unwelcome. A slow liquid ache that had no place here. Not with Jax's arms still around me, not with our future being cheered by every wolf we loved. I broke the kiss, breathless, and glanced back toward Cade. Our eyes met again, only for a second. And something inside me cracked open, just a hairline fracture, enough to let a whisper of golden light slip through. Jax felt me tense, his brow furrowed. Lily? I'm fine, I lied, forcing another smile as I leaned into him, burying my face against his neck so I wouldn't have to see those storm-silver eyes anymore. Just overwhelmed, in the best way. He kissed my temple, soft and steady. We've got this, you and me, always. I nodded against his skin, clinging to the solid warmth of him, to the scent that had always meant home. But even as the drums pounded on and the pack danced around us in celebration, that tiny fracture in my chest kept widening. A thread, thin, golden, ancient, pulled taut behind my ribs. And somewhere deep inside, where only the wildest part of me could hear, my wolf whispered one impossible word. Mine. Chapter 3. The Moon's Unspoken Claim. The ceremony circle had been prepared with reverent hands. Ancient stones formed a perfect ring beneath the open sky, each one etched with runes that glowed faintly silver under the rising moon. Torches burned at the cardinal points, flames steady and tall, casting long shadows that danced across the faces of the gathered pack. The air was thick with anticipation, jasmine from the wreaths draped over the stones, cedar smoke from the sacred fire, and the clean, wild musk of dozens of wolves standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the next chapter of their history to be written.
I stood at the center with Jax.
He looked magnificent in the firelight, broad shoulders, squared beneath his dark tunic, hazel eyes bright with pride and something deeper, something that made my throat tighten every time he glanced at me. His hand found mine, fingers threading through mine with that familiar, grounding strength. He squeezed once gently, and I felt the silent promise in it. We've got this. You and me, always. My dress clung to my skin, deep emerald silk that shimmered like forest water, the neckline low enough to catch the torch glow across the swell of my breasts. I'd chosen it because Jax had once whispered, half drunk on moon wine and me, that green made my eyes look like summer leaves after rain. Tonight I wanted him to remember that whisper. Tonight I wanted him to look at me and see only the future we had built together. The elders began the chant. Low, rhythmic words in the old tongue rose into the night, calling down the moon's blessing. My pulse matched the cadence, steady at first, then faster as the moon crested the treetops and flooded the circle with pure, liquid silver. Jax turned to face me fully. His free hand lifted to cup my cheek, thumb brushing the corner of my mouth. Liliana, he said, voice carrying just enough for the pack to hear but meant only for me. From the day you first laughed at one of my terrible jokes, I knew. Every patrol, every sunrise, every quiet night, I chose you. Not because fate demanded it, because my heart refused anyone else. Tears stung my eyes. Happy ones, the kind that make your chest feel too full. I opened my mouth to answer, to pour out the same vow I'd rehearsed 100 times in the mirror. And the moon reached zenith. A pulse, sharp, blinding, exploded outward from the sky itself. Silver light poured down like molten metal, slamming into my chest with the force of a physical blow. My breath punched out in a gasp. Invisible threads, golden, searing, wrapped around my ribs and yanked, hard, toward the far side of the circle. Toward him. Cade stood opposite us, tall and still as carved stone. Silver eyes wide with the same stunned recognition that now roared through my veins. The bond snapped taut between us, a living current of heat and power and raw, undeniable want. My knees buckled. Jax caught me instantly, strong arms banding around my waist, but I couldn't tear my gaze from Cade. My body betrayed me in an instant. Heat flooded me. Liquid fire starting low in my belly and spreading outward in pulsing waves. My nipples tightened painfully against the silk, aching for a touch that wasn't Jax's. Between my thighs, a sudden slick rush of arousal made me clench hard, thighs pressing together in helpless instinct. My wolf surged forward, claws scraping the inside of my mind, howling one word over and over. Mate, mate, mate. No. The word slipped from my lips, barely a breath. But the elders had already seen. Elder Mara's voice cracked like breaking ice. The moon has spoken. She raised trembling hands toward the sky. Alpha Cade has found his fated mate. A stunned hush fell over the pack. Then murmurs erupted, shock, confusion, a few low growls from Jax's loyal wolves. Jax's grip on me turned rigid. His breath came in short, ragged bursts against my hair. Slowly, agonizingly, he released me, stepping back as though the ground itself had turned to ash beneath his feet. I reached for him instinctively. Jax. He shook his head once, sharp, final. His eyes, those beautiful hazel eyes that had always looked at me like I hung the moon, were shattered, not with rage, not yet, with something far worse, quiet, devastating betrayal, the kind that doesn't scream. Simply stops breathing. Tell me you don't feel it, he whispered, voice so raw it tore something inside me. Tell me this is nothing. Tell me our years, every night, every promise, mean more than her whim. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because I did feel it. I felt it in the frantic beat of my heart, in the unbearable heat pulling between my legs, in the golden threads that now sang inside my blood like a siren call. My body was screaming for Cade, aching, dripping, ready in a way that made shame burn hot behind my eyes. And worse, far worse, part of my soul recognized him too. A deep ancient knowing that whispered, "This is what you were made for." Tears spilled over, hot, helpless. I feel it, I choked out. The admission tasted like broken glass. But Jax, I love you. I chose you. He stared at me for one endless heartbeat. Then his gaze flicked to Cade only once, and something inside him fractured beyond repair. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the circle. The pack parted for him like water. No one dared speak. His shoulders were rigid, steps measured, but I saw the way his fists clenched until blood welled between his knuckles. I wanted to run after him, to grab him, to scream that this wasn't real, that we could fight it. But my feet wouldn't move, because the bond wouldn't let me. Golden threads tightened around my ribs, pulling me forward, toward Cade, towards the alpha whose eyes had never left my face. He took one step into the circle, then another. Each movement deliberate, predatory, yet laced with something almost like reverence. When he reached me, he stopped, just close enough that I could feel the furnace heat rolling off his body, smell the storm and pine scent that made my mouth water against my will. "Lily," he said. His voice was low, rough, thick with the same hunger currently clawing through me. I trembled, not from fear, from the sheer force of wanting him. My core clenched again, empty and desperate, a fresh rush of wetness soaking the silk between my thighs. My breath came in shallow pants. He lifted a hand slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, and brushed one tear from my cheek with the pad of his thumb. The touch was electric. A spark jumped straight to my clit, making me gasp aloud. "I never wanted to take what wasn't freely given," he murmured, so quietly only I could hear. "But the moon doesn't ask permission, and neither does this." His gaze dropped to my mouth, then lower, to the frantic rise and fall of my breast, to the way my thighs pressed together in a vain attempt to ease the throbbing ache. He inhaled sharply, and I knew he could smell me, the slick evidence of my body's betrayal. His pupils blew wide, a low, feral growl rumbled in his chest. The sound vibrated through me, stroking every sensitive place at once. My knees nearly gave out again. Around us, the pack watched in stunned silence. The elders murmured prayers. Somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf howled, a mournful, broken sound that could only belong to Jax. And still the bond sang. Relentless, beautiful, terrifying. I closed my eyes, tears slipping free, and whispered the only truth left in me. What have we done? Chapter 4, Shattered Vows and Silent Pain. I ran. The moment the circle broke and the pack's stunned murmurs turned into a low, uneasy hum, my feet moved before my mind could catch up. Silk skirts tangled around my legs as I fled the sacred stones, torchlight flickering behind me like accusing eyes. The forest swallowed me whole, dark pines closing in, branches whipping at my arms, the cool night air stinging my tear-wet cheeks. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there, couldn't stand under the weight of Cade's silver stare or the elders' solemn nods or the memory of Jax walking away like part of him had already died. My lungs burned. My wolf clawed at the inside of my ribs, frantic, torn between the golden pulse screaming go back to him, and the raw bleeding need to find the man whose heart I'd just crushed without meaning to. Tears blurred the path until I stumbled out onto the riverbank, the same stretch of moonlit water where Jax and I had spent so many summer nights tangled together, whispering dreams we thought were ours alone. I collapsed to my knees on the damp moss, palms pressing into the earth as if I could anchor myself against the storm inside me. Sobs tore free, ugly, gasping, the kind that hurt your throat and leave you hollow. The bond throbbed in my chest like a second heartbeat, hot and insistent. But it couldn't drown out the memory of Jax's face when he let go of my hand. Footsteps crunched behind me. I didn't need to turn to know it was him. Jax stopped a few paces away. The silence between us was louder than any howl. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet it almost disappeared into the river's murmur. "Tell me you don't feel it." I flinched. Slowly, I lifted my head. He stood silhouetted against the moon, shoulders rigid, fists clenched at his sides until the knuckles showed white. His hazel eyes, always so warm, so steady, were glassy now, red-rimmed, shattered in a way that made my own heart stutter. "Tell me this is nothing," he continued, each word carved from pain. "Tell me our years. Every stolen kiss behind the training shed, every night I held you when the nightmares came, every promise we whispered under these same stars, mean more than some goddess's cold whim." I pushed myself up on trembling arms. My dress was mud-streaked, hair wild, but none of it mattered. Jax. He took one step closer, close enough that I could see the way his chest rose and fell too fast, the way a muscle ticked in his jaw like he was fighting not to break completely. "Please," he begged, and the sound of it, that single broken word from the strongest man I knew, nearly undid me. "Lie to me if you have to. Just say it." Fresh tears spilled. "I can't." The admission hung between us like smoke. He exhaled sharply as though I'd struck him. For a long moment, he simply stared at the river, jaw working. Then he closed the distance in 2 strides and dropped to his knees in front of me, heedless of the mud, heedless of everything except the space between our faces. His hands, those strong, calloused hands that had mapped every inch of me with reverence, cupped my cheeks. His thumbs brushed away tears even as his own slipped free. "I love you," he whispered, voice cracking. "I've loved you since you were the girl who dared me to race to the ridge and then laughed when I tripped. I've loved you through every patrol wound, every pack argument, every quiet dawn when the world felt too big and you made it small enough to hold. I chose you, Lily, every single day, and I would choose you again, even knowing this would happen." A sob ripped out of me. I leaned forward until our foreheads touched, breathing him in. Pine, salt, the faint metallic edge of blood from where he'd bitten his lip to keep from crying harder. "But I feel it," I choked out. "The bond. It's inside me now, burning, pulling. My body..." My voice faltered, shame flooding hot behind my eyes. "My body wants him, right now. It's aching for him in ways I never..." "Goddess, Jax. I hate it. I hate that it's betraying you." He closed his eyes. A tremor ran through him. Then, slowly, deliberately, he slid one hand to the nape of my neck and pulled me into a kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, starving, a last frantic claim. His mouth crashed against mine, teeth clashing, tongue sweeping deep like he could taste the truth out of me. I moaned into it, helpless, broken, and my hands fisted in his tunic, dragging him closer until our bodies pressed flush. Heat exploded between us, familiar and devastating. I could feel him hardening against my thigh, thick and insistent, and my own body answered with a fresh, shameful rush of wetness that soaked through what little remained of my dignity. He groaned against my lips, low and wrecked, One hand slid down my spine, fingers digging into the small of my back, arching me into him so every inch of me felt the hard length of his need. His other hand tangled in my hair, tilting my head so he could devour my mouth deeper, claiming every gasp, every whimper. For one blinding moment, the bond receded, just enough for it to be only us again. Only Jax's taste, Jax's heat, Jax's broken heart beating against mine. He broke the kiss first, panting, forehead pressed to mine. "Don't leave me tonight," he rasped. "One more night, just let me hold you. Let me pretend the moon hasn't taken you yet." Tears streamed down both our faces now. "I don't want to go to him," I whispered. "Not tonight, not ever. But the pull, I know." His voice cracked again. "I can smell it on you. The way your body's reacting. The way you're wet for him even while you're in my arms." The words should have humiliated me. Instead, they tore something wide open, raw honesty between us, the last barrier crumbling. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. "I'm so sorry." He shook his head, pulling me against his chest until I was curled in his lap, legs tangled with his face buried in the crook of his neck.
"Don't apologize for what the goddess did," he murmured against my hair. "Just stay with me a little longer. Let me love you the way I always have before everything changes."
We stayed like that for what felt like hours, two broken wolves on the riverbank, holding each other while the moon watched impassively overhead. His hand stroked slow circles on my back. His lips pressed soft, trembling kisses to my temple, my cheek, the corner of my mouth. Not demanding, not claiming, just memorizing. And beneath the grief, beneath the guilt, a tiny traitorous spark flickered in my chest. Wonder at what it would feel like to stop fighting, to let the golden threads pull me where they wanted, to discover if the heat currently scorching my veins was destruction or destiny. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop feeling it. Jax felt me tense. He lifted my chin with gentle fingers, searching my eyes. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "remember this. My love for you doesn't end because the moon says so. It ends only if you tell me it's over." I swallowed hard. "I don't know how to let you go." "Then don't, not yet." He kissed me again, slower this time, softer, full of goodbye and forever tangled together. And under the indifferent moon, with the river singing its endless lullaby, we held each other like the world wasn't already ending. Chapter 5. The Forbidden Pull. 3 nights had passed since the riverbank, and each one had been a quiet war inside my skin. I told myself I was strong enough to resist. That love, real love, the kind Jax and I had built brick by careful brick, could outlast any cosmic thread the moon chose to weave. I spent the days training with the younger wolves, running the eastern ridge until my lungs screamed, hoping exhaustion would dull the golden hum that lived behind my ribs now. It didn't. Every heartbeat carried his name like a secret I hadn't asked to keep. Cade. I avoided the Alpha's den. I avoided the council fire where his voice sometimes carried on the wind. Low, measured, commanding without ever needing to shout. I avoided looking toward the northern ridge where his silhouette occasionally appeared against the dusk sky, still and watchful, as though he too was fighting the same invisible tether. But the pull didn't care about my intentions. It grew sharper with every hour, a deep ache that started in my chest and radiated outward until even breathing felt like betrayal. My wolf paced restlessly inside me, whining low and mournful, refusing to settle. She didn't understand why we weren't running to him. She only knew the scent of storm and pine was missing, and the absence felt like starvation. On the 3rd night, when the moon hung low and heavy, waxing toward full again, I found my feet moving of their own accord. I told myself I was only going to speak to him, to demand answers, to beg him to release me somehow, to find a way to sever what the elders swore could never be severed. I told myself it was for Jax, for the pack, for the fragile peace that had already begun to crack along fault lines no one wanted to name. But deep down I knew the truth. I was going because I could no longer bear the emptiness. The path to the Alpha's den wound upward through ancient cedar, their trunks scarred by generations of claws marking territory and memory. Moonlight filtered through the canopy in silver shafts, turning the ground into a mosaic of light and shadow. My bare feet were silent on the pine needles, but my heart thundered loud enough to wake the entire forest. When I reached the wide stone ledge outside his quarters, the heavy oak door stood ajar as though he had known I would come. I hesitated, one hand pressed to the rough wood, feeling the warmth that still lingered from the fire inside. My throat closed. Every instinct screamed to turn back. Then his voice drifted out, soft and rough at once. "Lily!" He hadn't even looked up. I stepped inside. The den was larger than I expected. High ceilings supported by living cedar beams, a wide hearth where embers glowed like dying stars, furs and woven blankets scattered across the floor in comfortable disarray. Shelves carved into the stone walls held scrolls, carved totems, a single candle burning low. The air smelled of cedar smoke, old parchment and hymn, wild pine after rain, storm-charged wind, something darker and older beneath it all. Cade sat at a low table near the fire, broad shoulders hunched over an unrolled parchment. He wore only loose black trousers, the firelight painting bronze across the muscled planes of his back and the faint scars that told stories he had never shared. His dark hair was loose tonight, falling forward to shadow his face. He didn't rise. He simply lifted his head, silver eyes meeting mine across the quiet space. "You came," he said, not triumph, not hunger, just quiet acknowledgement, as though he had been waiting for this moment longer than either of us had lived. I stayed near the door, arms wrapped around myself like armor. I didn't want to. "I know." The honesty in those two words undid something inside me. My voice cracked on the next breath. "Then why does it feel like I'm dying every time I try to stay away?" He rose slowly, careful, deliberate, the way one approaches something fragile that might shatter at the wrong move. When he was only a few paces away, he stopped, hands open at his sides. "Because the bond is not a suggestion," he said quietly. "It is truth wearing the moon's voice. And truth once spoken cannot be unsaid." Tears welled without warning. I hated them. Hated how weak they made me feel. How they betrayed everything I wanted to hold on to. "I love him," I whispered. "Jax. I have loved him since we were children, stealing apples from the orchard and promising we'd run away together if the world ever turned cruel. He held me when my mother died. He taught me how to shift without fear. He chose me when no fate forced his hand. And now I'm standing here, in your den, because my body won't let me stay with the man who deserves me." Cade's expression never wavered, but something flickered deep in those storm-silver eyes. Pain, yes, but also a profound, aching understanding. "I never wanted to steal another man's love," he said, voice low and rough. "I never asked for this. I spent 3 years in the northern wastes learning to lead, learning to carry what an alpha must carry, believing I would one day find a mate the way others do. Slowly, by choice, by heart. Instead, the moon looked at me and said her. And the moment I saw you in that circle, every plan I had crumbled." He took one careful step closer. "I fought it too, Lily. For 3 nights I paced these walls, telling myself I could deny it, that I could let you have the life you chose. But the bond does not bargain. It only reveals what was always waiting beneath the surface." Another tear slipped free. I dashed it away angrily. "Then tell me how to stop it," I begged. "Tell me there's a ritual, a spell, a sacrifice, anything. Because I cannot keep tearing him apart like this. I cannot keep tearing myself apart." Cade exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with regret. "There is no undoing a fated claim," he said. "Not without breaking the pact itself. Not without inviting the old curses the elders whisper about only in the dark. But there is a choice still left to you." I searched his face. "What choice?" He lifted a hand slowly, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. "To know me," he said simply. "Not as the alpha who took what wasn't his. Not as the shadow that ended your first love. But as the male who has carried your name in his blood since the moment the moon first whispered it. Let me show you the scrolls, the histories, the reasons why some bonds are written in starlight instead of choice, and if, after that, you still turn away, I will stand aside, I will bear the weakness, I will let the pack suffer before I force you." The offer hung between us, raw, vulnerable, more devastating than any command could have been. I stared at his open hand for what felt like forever. Then, trembling, I placed mine in his. His fingers closed gently around mine. No heat, no possession, just quiet strength, steady as the mountains themselves. He led me to the table, unrolled another parchment, an ancient map of celestial alignments, lines of gold threading between constellations and wolf territories long forgotten. We sat, close enough that our knees brushed, but not touching beyond that first careful clasp of hands, and he began to speak. He spoke of the first pacts, of a time when the moon walked among us in wolf form, of bonds that had once saved entire bloodlines from famine and war, of fated mates who had turned the tide of battles not with claws, but with unbreakable unity. He spoke without flourish, without seduction, only truth, laid bare like the parchment beneath our fingers. And as he spoke, the golden thread in my chest eased. Not disappeared, but quieted as though it had finally been acknowledged instead of fought. Hours passed. The fire burned low. My tears dried on my cheeks. When the candle guttered out and only embers remained, I looked at him, really looked, and whispered the question that had haunted me since the circle. Why me? Cade's gaze softened, silver turning to something almost tender. Because the moon saw what I could not yet see. He said quietly, that you are not just a Beta's chosen love. You are the heart a pack needs when everything else falters. And because in every life I have lived before this one, I have waited for you. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward through every doubt I carried. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But I didn't pull my hand away, and in the silence that followed, deep, aching, beautiful, I felt the first fragile thread of something new begin to weave itself beside the grief. Not replacement. Not betrayal. Simply possibility. Chapter 6, Jealousy Shadow War. The pack had always felt like one living heartbeat, strong, synchronized, unbreakable. After the claiming night, that heartbeat fractured. It began quietly, the way winter creeps into autumn without announcement. Patrols returned earlier than scheduled, wolves moving in smaller groups, eyes darting toward the alpha's den with something between suspicion and sorrow. Conversations in the communal longhouse dropped when I entered the room. Laughter that once rang freely now came in short, guarded bursts. The air itself tasted different, thicker, laced with unspoken questions no one dared voice aloud. Jax withdrew first. Not dramatically, not with shouts or challenges or the kind of rage that would have given everyone a clear enemy to rally against. He simply faded from the center of things. He still trained the young ones at dawn, still led the eastern border runs, still nodded politely when the elders passed. But the warmth that had always lived behind his hazel eyes had dimmed to something flat and distant. When our paths crossed in the village paths, he offered a small, careful smile, the kind you give a stranger you once loved, and kept walking. Each time it happened, a fresh splinter drove deeper into my chest. I tried to speak to him. Once in the armory after dusk, I found him sharpening blades alone. The scrape of a whetstone on steel filled the silence between us like a third presence. Jax, I started, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look up.
The blades need tending, he said evenly.
Border skirmishes are increasing. We can't afford dull edges. I stepped closer, arms wrapped tight around myself. We need to talk. About everything. The whetstone paused mid-stroke. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the crackle of the low fire in the corner brazier. There's nothing left to say that hasn't already been said by the moon. He answered quietly. You feel it. I see it in the way you move now. Like part of you is always listening for a call I can't hear. Tears burned behind my eyes. I never wanted this. I know. He set the blade down with deliberate care. When he finally met my gaze, the pain there was so raw it stole my breath. That's the worst part. You didn't want it. You didn't choose it. And yet here we are. He stood then, tall and steady as ever, but there was a new hollow at the base of his throat, a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. I'm not angry at you, Lily, he said, and the gentleness in his voice hurt more than any accusation could have. I'm angry at the moon for making you suffer this. I'm angry at fate for turning our love into a wound the whole pack has to bleed from. But mostly, I'm just tired. He walked past me without touching, without even brushing my arm, and the absence of that simple contact felt like a door slamming shut forever. The fractures spread. Jax's loyal wolves, those who had run beside him since. Puphood began to question openly. At first, it was quiet murmurs during meals. The bond is sacred, yes, but so is loyalty. An alpha should protect what's already built, not claim what another heart holds. Then the murmurs turned to absences. Patrols that conveniently forgot to report to Cade. Supply runs rerouted without council approval. Training sessions held on the far ridge instead of the central fields. Cade felt every slight. He never raised his voice, never called anyone out by name. He simply grew quieter, more watchful, the silver in his eyes hardening into something storm-like and unreadable. He doubled border watches, sent scouts farther north, spoke of strengthening alliances with words that carried the weight of unspoken warnings. But the real war wasn't fought with teeth or claws, not yet. It was fought in glances, in silences, in the way a wolf would turn his back when the alpha passed. One gray dawn the first blood was drawn, not in battle, but in accident born of division. A young scout named Riven, barely 19, one of Jax's trainees, ran a routine. Perimeter check alone instead of in his assigned pair. He crossed paths with a rival pack's lone wanderer near the northern stream. The stranger lunged. Riven fought back. Claws raked across his flank before he drove the intruder off. He limped home bleeding, pride wounded deeper than flesh. When Cade arrived at the healer's lodge, Jax was already there, kneeling beside the cot, pressing clean linen to the wound, voice low and soothing. Their eyes met over Riven's pale form. Cade spoke first, combat-edged. He was alone. Patrol protocol requires pairs. Jax didn't flinch. He asked to run solo. I allowed it. A beat of silence stretched taut. You allowed it, Cade repeated softly. Because you no longer trust my orders to keep him safe. Jax's jaw tightened. I trust the wolf beside me more than the title above him right now. The words landed like stones in deep water. Riven's shallow breathing was the only sound for several long seconds. Cade exhaled slowly. Then we are already at war, he said. Not angry, not defeated, simply stating a fact that had been true for days. And not with claws, not yet, but with hearts. And hearts bleed longer. He turned and left without another word. I followed him out into the cold morning mist, heart hammering. Yeah, Cade. He stopped but didn't turn. His shoulders rose and fell once. I never wanted this, I said, echoing the same plea I'd given Jax nights before. None of it. When he finally faced me, the silver in his eyes was dull, exhausted. I know, he answered. But knowing doesn't stop the bleeding. He reached out, hesitant, almost afraid, and brushed a stray lock of hair from my cheek. The touch was feather-light, careful, the opposite of possession. I would rather face 1,000 rival packs than watch this one tear itself apart because of me, he murmured. Because of us. Tears slipped free before I could stop them. What do we do? He looked past me toward the village where smoke rose thin and grey from chimneys, where wolves moved like shadows carrying invisible burdens. We wait, he said quietly. We endure. We hope the pack remembers what holds us together is stronger than what pulls us apart. But hope felt thin that morning. Later, alone on the ridge overlooking the eastern border, I watched the sun struggle to rise through heavy clouds. Below me, two groups trained on opposite ends of the field. Jax's wolves in one cluster, Cade's in another. No one crossed the invisible line between them. My chest ached with the weight of it all. The love I still carried for Jax like a stone in my throat, the reluctant pull toward Cade that refused to quiet, the slow unraveling of the only family I had ever known. Somewhere in the distance a lone wolf howled, long, mournful, unanswered. I closed my eyes against the wind, against the tears, against the terrible certainty that had settled in my bones. Jealousy doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands in silence, watching everything you love bleed out one quiet drop at a time. And when the last drop falls, there may be nothing left to save. Chapter 7: The Curse Awakens. The blood moon rose like a wound in the sky, low, swollen, crimson, casting the entire valley in a light that felt wrong, as though the night itself were bleeding. I had never feared the full moon before. It had always meant freedom. The shift, the run, the wild joy of being more than human. Tonight it felt like judgment. I stood outside the Elder's Lodge, arms wrapped tight around myself against the chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Inside, voices rose and fell in urgent, hushed tones. I hadn't been summoned. I had simply followed the pull. Not the golden bond this time, but something heavier, older, colder. A certainty that whatever was being spoken behind those carved doors would change everything. The door opened. Elder Mara stepped out first, her face ashen beneath the red glow. Behind her came the others, gray-haired, bent-shouldered, eyes hollow with knowledge no one should have to carry. They saw me and froze. Liliana, Mara said. Her voice cracked on my name. You should not be here. I already am. She studied me for a long moment, then sighed, the sound of a woman who had hoped to spare someone pain and knew she could not. Come inside, child. The lodge smelled of sage smoke and old wax of herbs burned to ward off what could not be warded. A low fire crackled in the center hearth. The elders sat in a loose circle around it, faces illuminated in flickering orange and blood red. Cade was already there, standing near the far wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. His silver eyes found mine the instant I entered. For the first time since the claiming, there was no heat in them, only quiet dread. Mara gestured to an empty place on the woven mat. I sank to my knees, heart hammering so hard I thought the others must hear it. We have kept this from the pack for generations, she began, voice low and deliberate. Not out of cruelty, out of mercy. Some truths are too heavy to carry until they must be borne. She lifted a small, blackened wooden box from the center of the circle. Inside lay a single scroll, yellowed, brittle, sealed with wax the color of dried blood.
Centuries ago, she continued, when the first packs walked under this same moon, a great betrayal occurred. A fated mate rejected her destined bond for a chosen love. The moon was merciful at first, allowing the choice, but mercy has limits. When the rejected heart withered in silence, refusing to release what was never truly theirs, the goddess grew angry. She laid a curse upon any pact that harbors such a fracture without honest resolution.
Mara unrolled the scroll with trembling fingers. The ancient script glowed faintly under the firelight, runes I had never seen curling like thorns. The curse is slow, she said. It begins in the blood. Warriors grow weak. Their shifts come slower. Their wounds heal poorly. Pups are born still, or not at all. Borders weaken, not from enemy claws, but from within. The land itself forgets how to sustain us, and in time, the pack dies, not in battle, in silence, in fading. A chill crawled up my spine. I glanced at Cade. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle jumped beneath the skin. How long? I whispered. Mara met my eyes without flinching. It has already begun. The words landed like a blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. She continued, softer now. We have watched the signs for weeks. The young ones tire too quickly in training. Fevers come without cause and linger without reason. Last week, a litter of 3 was lost before they drew breath. The elders hoped, prayed, that the bond would settle quietly, that time would heal what fate tore open. But it hasn't, Cade said. His voice was rough, barely controlled, and it will not. Mara nodded once. The curse feeds on the unreleased heart, on love that clings past its time. There is only one way to break it. She looked at me then, really looked, and I understood before she spoke.
The rejected must offer honest farewell, she said, willingly, from the heart, not forced, not coerced. A ritual of release at the sacred spring under the next full moon. The words must be spoken freely. I release you. I set you free to follow your destiny. Only then will the golden chains dissolve. Only then will the pack breathe again.
Silence swallowed the lodge. I stared at the scroll until the runes blurred. My hands shook so violently I had to press them into my thighs to still them. Jax, his face flashed behind my eyes. Every memory sharp enough to cut. The way he smiled when I teased him. The steady press of his hand on my back during patrols. The night he held me while I cried for my mother and never once asked me to stop. The riverbank. His broken whisper. Let me pretend the moon hasn't taken you yet. I had already taken so much from him. Now fate demanded the last piece. Tears slipped free before I could stop them. They fell onto my lap, dark spots on the pale fabric of my tunic. I can't ask that of him. I choked out. He's already given everything. He's already bleeding for me every day. How can I stand before him and ask him to speak the words that end us forever? Mara's voice softened to something almost maternal. You do not ask him to end you, child. You ask him to save us all, including you. Including the future pups who will never know this pain if the curse is broken. Cade stepped forward then. He knelt beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, but he did not touch me. I will not force this, he said quietly. I told you that from the beginning. If you choose to walk away, if you choose Jax, if you choose to let the pack fade rather than ask this of him, I will stand with your decision. I will bear the weakness. I will watch our borders fall before I watch you suffer more than you already have. His words were steady, but his eyes, goddess, his eyes were wrecked. Silver turned to ash, glistening with unshed tears he refused to let fall. But know this, he continued, voice dropping to a raw whisper. The curse does not spare the fated pair. It will take me too, slowly, painfully. And it will take you with me. We will fade together, bound and broken, while the pack we were meant to protect dies around us. The weight of it crashed over me like a wave I couldn't outrun. I looked around the circle, at the elders who had carried this secret like a wound for lifetimes, at Cade who would sacrifice himself before forcing my hand, at the fire that burned low and steady while everything else crumbled. And somewhere beyond these walls, Jax trained alone in the dark, carrying a heartbreak no one else could see. I stood on shaking legs. I need to speak to him, I said. My voice sounded distant, hollow. Alone, at the sacred spring, tomorrow night. Mara nodded once, under the full moon. The ritual must be witnessed by the 3 of you, Alpha, Beta, and the heart between. No more, no less. I turned to Cade. He rose slowly, searching my face as though memorizing it in case this was the last time. I'm sorry, I whispered. He shook his head. Never apologize for loving honestly. But the apology wasn't just for him. It was for Jax. For the pack. For the future we might never see. I left the lodge without looking back. Outside, the blood moon stared down, unblinking, unforgiving. I walked into the night alone, tears freezing on my cheeks, and whispered to the darkness the only prayer I had left. Please let him forgive me. Please let there be something left of us when this is over. But deep in my bones, I already knew. Some endings are not clean. Some endings are necessary. And some endings simply break you open so the light can finally get in. Chapter 8. The Heart's Farewell. The sacred spring lay, hidden in a narrow ravine where the forest grew oldest and quietest. Moonlight poured down through a perfect circle of open sky, turning the water into molten silver. Mist rose from the surface in slow, ghostly spirals, carrying the faint mineral scent of deep earth and ancient stone. The spring itself was small, no wider than 3 wolves standing, shoulder to shoulder, but its depth was legendary. Elders said if you stared long enough into its black heart, you could see every choice you had ever made reflected back at you, clear and merciless. I arrived first. My bare feet were numb from the cold stones of the path. I wore only a simple white shift, the ritual garment Mara had pressed into my hands at dawn. Thin cotton that clung to my skin from the damp night air. No jewelry, no cloak, nothing to hide behind. The elders had insisted. Honesty required nakedness of the soul, and the moon would accept no less. I knelt at the water's edge, palms pressed flat to the smooth rock, and waited. My breath came in shallow clouds that dissolved too quickly. Every heartbeat felt borrowed. Jax arrived next. He stepped from the shadows of the pines without a sound, wearing the same dark tunic and trousers he had worn the night we stood in the ceremony circle. His hair was damp as though he had run through the mist to get here. His face, goddess, his face was a mask of careful composure. But I knew him too well. The hollows beneath his eyes were deeper, the line of his jaw sharper, the way he held his shoulders like he was bracing for a blow he had already taken. He stopped several paces away, not out of anger, out of respect, or perhaps fear that if he came closer, he would never be able to leave. "Lily?" he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. It cracked only on the second syllable of my name. I rose slowly, legs unsteady. Jax. We stood like that for what felt like forever, 2 broken pieces of the same heart, separated by moonlight and fate and the weight of what we had come here to do. He spoke first. "I thought about running," he admitted, gaze fixed on the water rather than my face. "Last night, I packed a small bag, stood at the northern border for hours, told myself I could disappear into the wilds, become one of those lone wolves the stories warn pups about. No pack, no memories, no you." My throat closed. Tears burned hot behind my eyes. "Why didn't you?" I whispered. He finally looked at me. The hazel eyes I had loved since childhood were glassy now, reflecting the crimson moon above us. "Because running would mean leaving you to carry this alone. And I promised you, years ago, under a different moon, that I would never leave you to face the dark by yourself." A sob escaped before I could stop it. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to hold the sound inside, but it slipped out anyway, raw, ugly, full of everything I had been trying not to feel. Jax took one step closer, then another, until he was close enough that I could see the faint tremor in his hands. "I'm not here to fight you," he said softly. "I'm not here to beg you to stay. I'm here because the pack is dying, because children are getting sick, because the land is forgetting how to feed us, and because I still love you enough to do the only thing left that might save any of us." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small smooth river stone, the one we had found together when we were 12, skipping rocks across this very spring. He had kept it all these years, a quiet talisman of the first time I had laughed so hard I fell into the water and he had jumped in after me without hesitation. He placed it in my palm. His fingers lingered against mine for one heartbeat, warm, steady, familiar, then withdrew. "I release you, Lily," he said. The words landed like thunder in the silence. I stared at him, vision blurring. "I release you," he repeated, voice steadier now, though tears tracked silently down his cheeks. "Not because the moon demands it, not because the elders told me I must, but because I love you. Because the girl who once dared me to race to the ridge and then kissed me when I won deserves a future bigger than the pain I'm holding on to. Because if I cling any longer, I become the curse instead of the cure." He swallowed hard. His next breath shook. "I set you free to follow your destiny, to stand beside the alpha who was chosen for you, to lead this pack the way it needs to be led. To be happy. Even if that happiness doesn't include me. The golden chains, those invisible threads I had felt tightening around my heart since the claiming, began to glow. Not with warmth, but with a fierce, purifying light. They shimmered into visibility for the first time. Delicate links of starlight wrapped around my ribs, around his, connecting us in a lattice of pain and love and sacrifice. One by one they cracked. The sound was soft, like ice breaking on a frozen lake, but it echoed through my entire body. Each fracture sent a jolt of cold through me, followed by a rush of something brighter, cleaner, air, light. Relief so sharp it hurt. Jax watched the chains dissolve. His face crumpled for one brief, devastating moment, then smoothed again into something almost peaceful. I will always carry our first love on, he said quietly. It will live here. He touched his chest over his heart. And it will make me better, stronger, kinder. But it no longer owns me. And it no longer owns you. Tears streamed down my face now, unchecked. I'm so sorry, I choked out. For everything. For the way this happened. For the pain I caused. For not being strong enough to... He shook his head fiercely. Don't apologize for what the goddess wrote. Apologize only if you ever forget how deeply you were loved and how deeply you loved in return. He stepped forward then, slowly, carefully, and pulled me into his arms. It was not a lover's embrace, it was a farewell. I buried my face against his chest, breathing in pine and salt and the faint metallic edge of grief. His heartbeat thundered beneath my ear, strong, steady, alive. I clung to him like I could hold time still, like I could keep this one last moment from slipping away. He pressed his lips to the top of my head, soft, reverent. Goodbye. When he finally stepped back, his hands lingered on my shoulders for one final second. Be brave, Lily, he whispered. The pack needs you. He needs you. And somewhere, I'll find my own way forward. He turned then, walked toward the path, did not look back. I watched him disappear into the pines until the mist swallowed him whole. The chains were gone. The curse shattered in a silent explosion of golden light, sparks rising into the night sky like fireflies released from a jar. I felt the pack stir in the distance, howls rising, not in mourning, but in sudden, renewed strength. Warriors who had stumbled now stood taller, children who had burned with fever now slept peacefully. The land itself seemed to exhale, but I stood alone at the spring, knees buckling, palms pressed to the cold stone as sobs tore through me, deep, wrenching, cleansing. Pain so pure it felt holy, sadness so vast it swallowed the stars. And beneath it all, blooming slow and tentative, the first fragile seed of healing. Because love, real love, does not die when it is released. It transforms. It becomes memory. It becomes strength. It becomes the quiet promise that even shattered hearts can mend. I stayed there until dawn began to gray the eastern sky. When I finally rose, trembling but upright, I turned toward the ridge where Cade waited. Not as a thief, not as a conqueror, but as the other half of a bond that had cost everything and might yet save everything. I walked forward into the light, carrying Jax's stone in my pocket, carrying his love in my heart, carrying the weight of a farewell that had set us both free. Chapter 9, Dawn of Two Hearts. Dawn came slowly to the ridge the way true healing comes, tentative, fragile, streaked with the softest rose and gold. The sky bled from deep indigo to pale lavender, then to a color so gentle it almost hurt to look at. Mist clung low to the pines, softening every edge as though the world itself were holding its breath after the night's long weeping. I walked the final stretch alone. My white shift was damp from the spring's mist and streaked with earth from where I had knelt too long. My hair hung loose and tangled, heavy with tears and dew. My feet were cold, but I barely felt it. The ache in my chest had shifted, not gone, never gone, but reshaped. Where once there had been chains, now there was only an open space, raw, tender, waiting to learn how to beat again. Cade waited at the highest point of the ridge. He stood with his back to the rising sun, silhouette dark against the lightening sky. He wore the same black tunic from the Elder's Lodge the night before, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair wind-tossed and unbound. His arms were loose at his sides, but his posture carried the quiet tension of a man who had spent hours preparing for a moment he both feared and needed. When he heard my footsteps on the loose shale, he turned. Our eyes met across the last few paces of stone and grass. For one heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he dropped to one knee, not in ceremony, not in performance, just surrender. The alpha of the pack, the male whose voice could silence a battlefield, lowered himself before me like I held the only power that mattered. Lily, he said. His voice was rough from a night without sleep, thick with everything he had held back. I have waited here since the moment you left for the spring. I told myself I would not beg. I told myself I would accept whatever you decided, even if it meant stepping aside forever. But standing here, watching the light touch the horizon, I realized something. He lifted his gaze to mine. Silver eyes shimmered, wet and unashamed. I am not afraid of losing the pack. I am not afraid of losing my title. I am afraid of losing the chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved, not as a stolen price, not as a fated obligation, but as the woman who chose to walk toward me after everything was broken open. A sob caught in my throat. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the place where the chains had been, empty, light, aching with possibility. Kate continued, voice dropping to a near whisper. I never wanted to be the reason your first love ended. I never wanted to be the shadow that fell across your happiness. If I could give you back every moment you lost with him, I would. But I cannot. All I can offer is the rest of my days, every sunrise, every storm, every quiet night, to prove that fate did not choose wrong, that you were always meant to stand here with me, not despite the pain, but because of what it taught us both. Tears spilled freely now. I didn't wipe them away. They felt honest, necessary. He rose slowly, never breaking eye contact. I kneel not as Alpha claiming what is his, he said. I kneel as Cade, the male who has carried your name in his blood since the moon first whispered it, who watched you love another with such fierce loyalty that it humbled me, who would rather walk away and let you heal than force one more tear from your eyes. He extended both hands, palms up, open, empty, waiting. I ask you, Lily, not command, not demand, but ask if you will let me love you, not to replace what was, not to erase what Jax gave you, but to build beside it, to honor the heart that loves so deeply it could release you, to stand with you as equals, as partners, as two souls who found each other through the wreckage and chose to keep walking forward together. The wind rose then, soft at first, then stronger, lifting my hair, tugging at his tunic, carrying the scent of pine and new light across the ridge. Somewhere below us, the pack was waking. Distant howls of renewed strength, children's laughter echoing from the village, the land breathing easier for the first time in weeks. I looked down at his open hands. They were scarred, faint lines from old battles, calluses from years of holding sword and shield and responsibility. They trembled, just slightly, not from weakness, from hope so fierce it bordered on terror. I stepped forward, one pace, then another. When I was close enough to feel the warmth rolling off him, I lifted my own hands and placed them in his. His fingers closed around mine, gentle, reverent, as though I were made of starlight and might vanish if he held too tight. I choose you, Cade, I whispered. The words came out cracked but clear. Not because the moon demands it, not because the curse forced my hand, but because I see you. The male who waited, who endured, who would have let me go rather than see me broken further. I choose you, because my heart, after everything, still has room to learn how to love again. A shudder ran through him, deep, silent, profound. He pulled me forward until our foreheads touched, not a kiss, not yet, just a breath mingling, tears mingling, hearts finding the same unsteady rhythm. I will spend every day earning that choice, he murmured against my skin. I will never ask you to forget him. I will only ask you to let me stand beside the memory of what was good and help you carry the light of what can still be. I closed my eyes, letting the first rays of true sun warm my face. I'm scared, I admitted, of what comes next, of how much it still hurts, of whether I'll ever stop looking over my shoulder for the boy who once held my hand through every storm. Cade's thumbs brushed slow circles across my knuckles. Then be scared with me, he said softly. We'll face it together, every dawn, every doubt, every quiet night when the past whispers loudest. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for time. For patience, for the chance to show you that love can grow again, even from ashes. I nodded against him, small, trembling. Yes, I breathed. Time, patience, He exhaled, a long, shuddering sound of relief, and wrapped his arms around me. The embrace was careful, almost hesitant, as though we were both learning the shape of this new closeness. His heartbeat thundered against my ear, strong, alive, steady. Mine answered, slower now, finding its place beside his. We stood like that as the sun climbed higher, painting the ridge in gold. Below us the pack moved, stronger, whole again. Warriors ran the borders with renewed vigor. Mothers cradled sleeping children without fear. The land itself seemed to sigh in gratitude, and on a distant ridge far enough that he was only a shadow against the trees, I saw him. Jax. He stood alone, watching, not with anger, not with longing, but with something quieter, something healed. He lifted a hand once, small, brief, a gesture of farewell and blessing, then turned and walked into the forest. My throat tightened. Cade felt it. He pressed a soft kiss to my temple. He'll find his way, he whispered, and we'll find ours. I nodded, tears slipping free again, not from grief this time, but from the overwhelming beauty of it all. Love that could break and still choose to mend, hearts that could release and still hold space for joy. Under the rising sun, with Cade's arms around me and Jax's blessing carried on the wind, I finally let myself believe it. The dawn was not an ending. It was a beginning. Fragile, hard-won, beautiful, and ours. Yeah, if your heart is still racing, if tears are still drying on your cheeks, if you're sitting there wondering how love can hurt this much and still feel so right, then you just lived through Beta's betrayal with me. And beautiful soul, that means you belong here. In this library, we don't run from the ache, we lean into it. We let the moon pull us apart so we can find our way back together stronger. So if tonight's story cracked you open in the best, most painful way, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the bell so you never miss the next full moon heartbreaky or the next slow burn healing. Because the next story is already waiting. Another forbidden pull, another impossible choice, another love that refuses to stay broken. And I write these for hearts like yours. Drop a comment below and tell me, who stole your heart more, steady, loyal Jax, or the storm-eyed Alpha Cade who was always meant to be hers? Or are you still torn just like Lily was? I read every single comment. Your words keep this library alive. Thank you for trusting me with your heart tonight. Until the next moon rises, stay wild, stay brave, stay loved.